Walters will have all of March Madness on their 30-plus TVs, located both inside and outside. Walk on over to Walters during your lunch break when the first round begins on Thursday, March 20th.
You just realized that you needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs help you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people that you want faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Plus, with Indeed sponsored jobs, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. How fast is Indeed? Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/BWN. Just go to Indeed.com/BWN right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/BWN. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
3-1 offering is on the way. And that's hit in the air to deep right field. Back goes Cruz, way back. Warning track on the wall. He leaps and he made the catch. Oh my goodness, what a catch by Dylan Cruz. Back in barely time to set up and make a leaping catch up against the 14-foot, 8-inch wall. About 10 feet to the left of the Nationals bullpen. A spectacular play by Dylan Cruz. 2 men away.
And welcome to Nats Chat for Wednesday, March 5th, 2025, along with MASNsports.com Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman, who is fresh off providing color commentary for the MASN telecast of the Nats 6-4 exhibition loss to the St. Louis Cardinals in West Palm Beach, Florida on Tuesday afternoon. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. This is our second episode of the week. We want to thank everyone for the nice words and good numbers for what was the first ever emergency installment of this podcast. That episode came out on Monday night off the big news on Monday morning that the MASN dispute is over. Your support of this podcast means a lot, so thank you. You on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify can both rate the podcast and write reviews. 5-star ratings, very much appreciated. Positive reviews, very much appreciated. These things help us out a lot. Thank you very much for doing them. You can find us on X at Nats_chat. You can find us on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. You can email the show, natschatpodcast@gmail.com, including if you would like to sponsor the podcast for the upcoming season, all kinds of ways we can serve you. Hit up Tim Shovers, who runs the podcast. Again, that email address, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. We on this installment of the podcast get back to discussing on the field matters for the Nats. But Mark, I enjoyed watching you and Dan Kolko on the call on Tuesday afternoon. You guys had Mike Rizzo with you for a bit. Want to get to that. But how was calling the game? Now, it's not the first game that you've called, but it's obviously not something that, we see you doing all the time.
Yeah, not the first one. The first one that I actually had more than a couple hours notice of, though. The previous time, back in 2021, when COVID was still very much a part of everyone's lives, there was a last-minute scramble when both Bob Carpenter and Dan Kolko tested positive, and so I was thrown into the booth with Kevin Franzen, who got to learn how to do play-by-play on the fly for the first time. We had a great time with it, but it was a very different kind of experience and a regular season game. This one I'd known about for a while. I appreciated the fact that they gave me the chance to do that. I love getting to work with Dan Kolko, who I've known for years. We're on the air all the time on the pregame show, but had never been able to do a game together. And it was an enjoyable experience. Spring training is very different than regular season broadcast. There's a lot of interviews during the first half of the game, and then a lot of lineup changes, and you're trying to keep track of who's in there and who's wearing number 97 and all that kind of stuff. But Dan was real good at keeping track of it all. Chip Winfield, our producer, kept track of it all. And I enjoyed it. I appreciate everyone who sent nice comments about it. And I don't know if it's something I'll get the chance to do again, but if it was only a one-time deal, I enjoyed it very much. And before we move on, I just want to say also, good job to you and Tim for putting out the emergency episode the other day. I listened to it. You guys touched on all the relevant subjects. I appreciate everyone who has reached out to me in regards to this topic. and appreciate that everyone understands how I'm not really in a position to be able to talk about anything that's going on with it. It affects the teams, it affects the network, and of course it down the road can affect me. But thank you for everyone who has reached out. I really do appreciate that, understanding, the impact of this story on me from a personal standpoint.
Absolutely. And we certainly hope for the best for you and for everyone who works for MASN. I mentioned Mike Rizzo joining you and Dan Coco during the broadcast. It was good to have that. And I don't know if you were trying to get some news out of Mike Rizzo, but it was interesting listening to what you guys hit on. And while Rizzo was with you, there was this great catch by Dylan Cruz, maybe the highlight of the game, top of the second, Cruz making this terrific diving backhanded catch in the left center field gap. And he, for this game, was the Nats starting center fielder. You see stuff like that throughout spring training. We all get the idea here. He's going to be the regular right fielder with Jacob Young in center field. But you asked Mike Rizzo about, how much we might see Dylan Cruz in center field. And that was something that we did talk about last season off Cruz being promoted. Part of the appeal of him being taken with the number 2 overall pick was that he can play center field. Jacob Young did such a good job in center field that I think we all get why Jacob Young is positioned to be the number 1 center fielder. I know Rizzo didn't give you much on that, but do you think we'll see a decent amount of Dylan Cruz in center field this season, or probably not?
Well, my sense of it is that obviously Jacob Young is the opening day center fielder, and as long as he's producing, he's going to be the everyday guy there. But he's not going to play 162. Nobody does at this point. And when he has a day off, or if anything were to happen to him along the way, the plan is for Dylan Cruz to be the number 2 center fielder. So even if, say, Alex calls on the team as the 4th outfielder and Jacob Young is sitting out a game, I think you're going to see Cruz shift to center field for that day, and then, say, Alex Call be in right field. They do believe that Cruz is a major league center fielder, that he can play the position and probably play it quite well. They just happen to have a Gold Glove caliber guy already there, and that's his calling card, and he's not going to move from that position. But I also mentioned on the broadcast, as the season plays out, if Jacob Young does struggle in any way, more so from an offensive standpoint, if really not living up to what they need him to be, and if Robert Hassel III is raking at AAA, I think there's an interesting discussion to be had at that point about Young's security as the number 1 center fielder and whether Hassel could push the envelope and force the issue and maybe come up to the big leagues. And if that were to happen, again, my guess would be we'd see Hassel at a corner position and we'd see Dylan Cruz in center. So there is the belief within the organization that Dylan Cruz is a center fielder. He's just going to play right field because they have a better center fielder among their current options.
And that, of course, gives you the potential for excellent outfield defense when you have 2 center field caliber outfielders making up 2/3 of your starting outfield. That's excellent. And you could argue you have 3 because James Wood has even played some center field, albeit in the minors. It's exciting to think about what this outfield could be, both from an offensive and defensive perspective. And, with Jacob Young, we had some fun on the last, 2 installments ago of the podcast with him getting all jacked up in the offseason. But, there was a piece in the Washington Post within the last few days, Young overhauling his swing. I mean, he clearly is taking this need to be better offensively seriously, because I think he gets it. Yes, his defense was exemplary last season, and he has earned his way into being the number 1 center fielder for now. But it's almost like he's got to re-earn that because there are these other outfield prospects. And to your point, while I guess there is a bit of a leash here for Young, it's probably not like a mile long. And if he does struggle offensively, and if, say, the defense slips a little bit, and we know how it is with defensive metrics, they were so good last season, it's almost, it is. It's really hard to duplicate that season in, season out. I mean, we saw that with Victor Robles, 2019, absurdly good defensive numbers, never got back to that level again. So yeah, I mean, with Jacob Young, he does need to have another good season here. Fair or unfair, he has to continually prove himself in a way that other Nationals highly touted young players probably do not.
Right, and we've pointed that out. He wasn't the first round pick. He, a year ago was not part of the long-term dream outfield. It was probably Wood, Cruz, and Hassel. And then you have these other prospects down the road like Elijah Green and Christian Vaquero and guys who haven't quite made it yet. But Jacob Young, later round pick, never seen as this great offensive prospect. They knew he was good defensively, great speed on the bases. And just by virtue of coming up first, and in a lot of ways because of Victor Robles' struggles and injury early last season as well, that created the opportunity for Young before anyone else was ready for it, including Wood and Cruz. And he took it and he ran with it and he was great. Now, I think it's a really interesting question offensively is what is the acceptable bar there that you can live with? If you're getting Gold Glove defense from him and he's the number 9 hitter in your lineup, can you deal with a sub 700 OPS from him, which is probably what you're going to get? I think if the rest of the lineup is solid, if your 1 through 8 is pretty good and you're scoring runs and you're hitting home runs, and I think you can get away with that. If it's not as good, if your 7 and 8 hitters aren't as good, then I think you feel a little more pressure there and thinking we need to be better if there is a better alternative. So I'll be real interested to see how that plays out. I think it's not just about how Young himself performs, but how the team is doing. If the team's going well, if the offense looks like it's solid 1 through 8, I think you can get away with it with having a weak hitter in the 9 position. If, on the other hand, the team is struggling to score runs and you've got one of these prospects knocking on the door at AAA, I think there could be more pressure to say, okay, we need to make a change here. Even if we've got a Gold Glover in center field, we need more offense.
Yeah, Jacob Young's OPS for last regular season, 648. That's low. That's unacceptably low. His OPS plus was 86. That's unacceptably low. You know, you'd love for that OPS to be in at least the high 600s. You'd love for the OPS plus to at least be in the 90s. I mean, 100 is league average. So if he can just get it up to that and still play the great defense, run the bases really well, I think he's good. But it's that, Danny Espinosa situation of, is the offense so bad that you just can't play him every day, even though you'd love to because the defense and the base running are so good? There was something else that Mike Rizzo said to you guys that caught my ear. Rizzo said of the Nats' overall pitching staff for the 2025 season, quote, "It's as deep of a staff as we've ever had here," end quote. As deep of a staff as we've ever had here, end quote. And he said that, and you might be saying to yourself, okay, maybe he's just saying that, maybe he misspoke. But then he added that he was saying that with the understanding that you can go back to the, quote, championship days, end quote, and still say this. This is as deep of a pitching staff as the Nats have ever had, including the pitching staffs for the Nats when the team was really good 2012 through 2019. That was really interesting that he said that. What did you think about him saying that?
He's actually said it more than once this spring, to be honest. I think what he's referring to there, making a little bit of an inference here, but I think it's probably fair to say, I don't believe that he would try to make the case that this is a better rotation than they had in 2019 or 2017 or anything like that. Certainly their 1, 2, and 3 don't compare to what they had back then. I think what he's referring to here is that their 5, 6, 7, 8 is better than it's ever been before. And I think there's maybe an argument for that in that they're going to get to the end of camp here and probably have a couple of guys who would be good enough to make the team under most circumstances as number 5 starter and won't make it because they don't have the spots for them. And they know they're going to need them along the way. This has always been a bit of a problem for them. It's a problem for a lot of teams that as soon as somebody goes down in your rotation, you've got to find a capable replacement. And there have been years where they just did not have anybody who was up to that standard. Even at times, they didn't really have a number 5 starter that was up to standards that you would want. I think they feel like they're in a much better position with that now, with the likes of DJ Hers and Mitchell Parker, Shinosuke Ogasawara. But even beyond that, Brad Lord, Tyler Stewart, ultimately Jarlin Susana, Alex Clemmie, and Travis Sikora, and they're more down the road a ways. I think that's what he's referring to, and that while they may not have the top of the rotation that those great teams had, there is a depth there that they hope they don't have to call upon, but they know chances are they will have to call upon, that they will feel better about if and when that happens. Cade Cavalli, I should also mention in that mix at some point, and Josiah Gray before the end of the year. So I think that's what he's referring to, that they are in a better position to deal with the attrition of a major league rotation than they have been in a long time.
It's a bold statement for sure, because, obviously when you say depth, you're not just talking about quantity. In theory, you're talking about quality. And there are questions with a lot of these guys. So you can have a lot of starting pitching options, but if they're not very good, then you don't really have depth. But to your point, you can definitely name pretty easily, 6, 7, 8, 9 potentially viable starting pitching options for the Nats for this coming season. You couldn't do that the last few years. And so that is good. The Nats, we discussed this. They've been pretty fortunate in terms of overall injury luck the last few seasons. Now, last season with the pitching staff, you took some big hits with Josiah Gray and Trevor Williams. From a position player standpoint, they've been especially fortunate the last few seasons. You certainly hope that continues. But, if they do have one of these years in which they get walloped by injury, and hopefully they don't, but if they do seem pretty well positioned for it from a standpoint of having viable starting pitching options.
Yeah, so they've actually used the fewest starting pitchers in the majors over the last 2 seasons. That may surprise some people. And again, that doesn't mean quality. That means they've all stayed healthy. And, we want to relitigate the Patrick Corbin situation, the fact that he got all those starts and nobody ever had to replace him despite his performance. That's a big part of that. But they have used, I believe it's the number is 9 starting pitchers over the last 2 seasons, the fewest in the majors. You hope you can do that again, but that chances are that doesn't happen. And so I think they do feel like they are in a better position to handle that. And you're not talking about the Yoan Adones anymore. Even Jackson Rutledge, who's still in camp, but it's kind of an afterthought at this point. Think about all the starts by Corey Abbott and our buddy Paolo Espino over the years. They think they're in a better position, that they're not talking about journeymen or guys who don't have a future. These are all pitchers who have a chance to be successful big leaguers, even if they aren't proven yet.
Shout out Paolo Espino. We will always love you on the Nats Chat podcast. Hey, Al Galdi here for Window Nation. The only thing more amazing than the Masson dispute finally ending is the latest great offer from Window Nation to listeners of the Nats Chat podcast. 2 free windows for every 2 windows that you buy, and you pay nothing until 2027. This offer is good for now through March 31st. Schedule your free estimate. Call 866-90Nation or visit windownation.com and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast. Window Nation windows are the best. Times are tough financially right now. One of the best investments that you can make is on home improvements, especially ones that increase the value of your home and save you money in the long run. Window Nation windows do just those things. 866-90Nation, windownation.com to Window Nation. That Al Galdi sent you, and make sure that you get the special offer. 2 free windows for every 2 windows that you buy. Pay nothing until 2027. 866-90Nation or windownation.com. That's 866-90Nation or windownation.com. And tell Window Nation that Al Galdi from the Nats Chat podcast sent you.
You just realized that you needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs help you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people that you want faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Plus, with Indeed sponsored jobs, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. How fast is Indeed? Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/BWN. Just go to Indeed.com/BWN right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/BWN. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
2-2. Called strike 3, bottom of the zone, and Jarlin Susana strikes out 4 batters in the bottom of the first.
You mentioned Jarlin Susana. So the Nats on Tuesday morning made their first round of cuts of this spring training. Among those assigned to minor league camp, pitcher Jarlin Susana, catcher Caleb Lomavita. I want to get to him momentarily. But with Susana, I mean, look, he's a flamethrower. We've known that for a while. I know him pitching during spring training has provided for some of the real highlights of Nationals spring training so far. Any surprise that he was this early of a cut, or not really?
No, not at all, because I don't think this has anything to do with performance. This is strictly a matter of he's a starting pitcher who's going to open the year in the minor leagues, probably AA, and needs to start building up to being a starting pitcher. You can't get that in spring training once you get to this point. You saw Jake Irvin went 4 innings in his start the other day. When the starters are going 2 innings, you can piggyback them and get enough work for everyone. Once you get to the point that the starters are being stretched out, you have to send these guys to minor league camp and get them on a 5-day routine and get them ready for the season. Now, I mean, Susana is raw. And what we saw of him in the big league games, you see the radar gun 102, 103 at times. The command is still not entirely there. It was his first time in big league camp. He's still 20 years old. There's a long path still to go for him, but I don't think they were discouraged by anything. And I don't think the decision to send him down now had anything to do with performance or belief of readiness for the big leagues. It's about getting him ready for the upcoming minor league season and reiterating their point, because this has been brought up. A lot of people have wondered, hey, you got this guy who throws 103, command's a little shaky, you have bullpen questions, why not just throw him out there and see what he could be as a late inning reliever? Not to say that couldn't happen someday down the road, but they are adamant that they believe this guy is a starting pitcher, sustains velocity through 5+ innings, made some big strides last year at single A. They want to give him every opportunity to make it as a starter before they would make that change. And so because of that, you get him on a starter's plan right now and put him in minor league camp.
Absolutely. You can always convert him to a reliever. I think the fascinating thing would be if the Nats are in postseason contention, maybe late in the season, they need some bullpen help. They summon Susana to the majors and have him do as David Price did many years ago, and as a guy who's projected to be a starter is utilized as a reliever in a pennant run, that kind of a thing. But no question, I mean, you get so much more out of a pitcher if he's a starter for you than if he is a reliever for you. The stuff, though, is just tremendous with him. I mean, just reading about him, it's so exciting to think about what he might eventually look like. So with Caleb Lomavita, MLB Pipeline has come out with its top 30 prospects for each major league team. Susana, by the way, is the Nats' number 3 overall prospect. Number 1 is Dylan Cruz. Number 2 is Travis Sakura. Lomavita checks in at number 9. So we have not had a Keibert Ruiz conversation just yet. I know you wrote about him for MASNsports.com a few weeks back. You know, it's funny how time flies, right? 2021 was when the Nats acquired Keibert Ruiz in that fire sale in July of that year. Here we are now, 2025 season. This will be season number 5 for Keibert Ruiz with the Nationals, you know, to at least some degree. I mean, he wasn't with them for all of 2021, but, you know, it's been a while here. Now, he's still in his mid-20s, so it may feel like he's a little older than he is. He isn't, but we're now 2 years removed from the 8-year contract extension that he signed. He's coming off the back-to-back down seasons. The Nats in the 2024 MLB draft had 3 of the top 44 picks. Took catcher Caleb Lomavita out of the University of California, Berkeley with the number 39 overall pick. Now, he still is set to be in the lower level of the minors, so it's not like he's ready to be promoted to the majors this season. But when it comes to Keibert Ruiz, if he has another down season or another so-so season, are we talking about him no longer being the plan at catcher moving forward, or would you say we're not quite there yet?
I think there's some increased pressure, to be sure, and I think he knows it. He feels it coming into this year. He's the first one to admit that last year was not good. He was not satisfied in any way with how the season went. He has worked on, number 1, losing some weight to get in a better shape. He really is adamant that he is going to try to be more selective at the plate. That's his biggest issue offensively, is that he swings at everything and makes weak contact when it's out of the zone. And typically when he does get a good pitch to hit, he does damage with it. So I think they know, and he knows that it's in there. It's just a matter of pitch recognition and swinging at the right ones. And defensively, he knows there's work to be done as well. So there's a lot on his plate. Now, at the moment, there really isn't an alternative there pushing him for the number 1 job. Arguably, their candidates for the number 2 job, Riley Adams and Drew Millis, also struggled a lot last year. You saw them kind of bounce up and down themselves, more so with Adams, who was the de facto guy and got sent down a couple of times because of his struggles. But Millis, in limited time when he came up, didn't exactly seize that himself and say, okay, I'm the new guy here. So I think there is some cushion there for Ruiz without anybody knocking on the door. Now, if it's another rough year, then it kind of depends on Lomavita's progress. He was a college kid, so he could be a quick mover up through the system. Let's remember, the Nationals had never used a first or second round pick on a catcher prior to this. Now, unless you want to count Bryce Harper as a catcher when he was drafted, technically he was, but they knew that wasn't going to happen as a professional. So they've understood they have never been able to develop their own in-house catcher. Everyone they've had has come from somewhere else, either through trade or free agency. So if Lomavita is the real deal, and there's a long way to go before we know if he is, then that could put pressure on Ruiz. Or if this team takes that step that we all think they're taking, and they look like they're ready to compete next year, and they're concerned that they're not good enough at the catcher's position, maybe you do start looking at free agents out there, a veteran who could step in even on a short-term deal to challenge him or take over or split the job with him, the way that Kurt Suzuki and Yan Gomes did during the championship year. So there's a lot of options there. But for now, Keibert Ruiz is the guy. It's up to him to prove that he should continue to be the guy long-term.
We have seen Josiah Gray have a step forward season. We have seen CJ Abrams have a step forward season. We have seen Mackenzie Gore have a step forward season. We really have not seen that yet from Keibert Ruiz. And obviously at some point you do need to see that. We talked as last season went on about the possibility of the Nats signing a veteran catcher this past offseason. I thought it would have made sense, just as like Keibert Ruiz insurance obviously did not happen, even though also, and you just mentioned it, it doesn't seem like the Nats are in love with Riley Adams and Drew Millis. I mean, not only have those guys underperformed, but whenever they get promoted to the majors, and remember last year it was kind of back and forth. One guy would come up, the other guy would go down. Neither guy would play all that much. He would get promoted and he just wouldn't play that much. Keibert Ruiz likes to play almost every day. We get that. Maybe that's part of the problem. Perhaps less would be more. But that's kind of interesting that the same catcher hierarchy, at least at the major league level, remains in place. And the Nats, as far as we know, didn't even really try to sign a veteran catcher this past offseason. But, I thought about something else, too. And it's funny you bring up Harper. There now are so few truly good offensive catchers in the majors. And I think part of that is the way it goes to where if you're a really good hitter and you're a catcher, they make you stop being a catcher, right? So some of this is sort of preordained. But the sport has changed, and being a catcher, I feel like, is more onerous than ever before. Physically demanding because pitchers throw so hard, mentally taxing because you have so much on your mind in terms of the information when it comes to game calling and pitch sequencing and, your baseball ops department, what it's feeding you in terms of scouting reports about players. There was a time in baseball, right, where some of the great players in the game were catchers. I mean, you go back to like a Yogi Berra, a Johnny Bench, a Carlton Fisk, a Mike Piazza. Now, you don't have that anymore. You have catchers who are known for defense. You don't have many who are known for offense. Those who do become known for offense evaporate quickly. You see a Buster Posey, you see a Joe Mauer. Those guys did not last long relative to other great hitters over the last 20, 25 years. And I wonder sometimes if maybe we just have to rethink the position of catcher even more than we have and just understand most of these guys are not very good hitters. And so, the bar is really different and you almost have to judge catcher separately than any other position in the sport because it is in a way right now that it almost never has been. And I can't recall there being so few true standout offensive players at catcher in MLB.
Who's the best catcher in the game right now? I'm even trying to think Salvador Perez. And he's a big offensive guy, but he's a big lumbering guy who's been doing it for a long time. And it's definitely changed. And you're right that I think defense is being prioritized more and there's just a physical wear and tear on the position. But here's another wrinkle to all this and why this could change again as we move forward. If we do get the ABS challenge system or even beyond that, all of a sudden the pitch framing notion that has been harped on so much in recent years, and that's the number one thing that you're supposed to do, that's out the window. Now, the only thing you have to do is be able to know whether to challenge or not. So you have to have a good eye for that, but you don't have to frame the pitch necessarily anymore. And so if that skill's off the table, does that open the door to teams to say, well, okay, we can maybe focus on offense a little bit more and defense doesn't matter as much. Now, there's still a lot of defense involved, calling the game, studying the hitters, throwing out runners in this new age of stolen bases all the time. So you can't eliminate that entirely and just have an offense only kind of catcher. But I would be interested to see if that changes the dynamic at all, if we do ultimately get the automated balls and strikes, because that fundamentally changes a major part of what a catcher's job is.
Absolutely. And we know specific to Keibert Ruiz, pitch framing has been an issue, and it's something he has spent a lot of time on. And, in theory, if you're spending all this time on something like your pitch framing and your defense, that's less time than you can be spending on your offense. It's also that, during a game, you're constantly thinking about your defense, right? Maybe not thinking as much about your offense as you could be. So I get it. It's not an easy position. Keibert has had some rough injury luck. I mean, we remember the testicular contusion of a few years ago, so we get it. And none of this with him, I mean, everything about him seems to be good from a standpoint of he works hard, he cares, he's become a leader on the team, so none of this is he's a bad guy or anything like that. But the performance does need to be better. And, I guess it's kind of like the Jacob Young thing. No one's asking you to be an MVP candidate offensively, but you can't put up the offensive numbers he has put up, especially what he did last season.
One other thing that I think is going to help him in this regard, you just said you don't have to be an MVP. By nature of when he joined the team and where they were at in their rebuild, he was kind of viewed as this focus of the rebuild and one of the top guys, and frequently was hitting third or fourth in this lineup. And that's probably not who he's supposed to be. If this season works out the way they think that it should, and you have much more legitimate hitters in the middle of your lineup, you're going to see him bat seventh or eighth most of the time, even if he's doing well. I think that can make a difference and take some of that load off of him to feel like, okay, hey, you got to be one of the guys to lead us. No, you just need to be a complimentary player offensively. Go be a good catcher. I think that could actually make a big difference for him.
Well, it's like you just read my mind because I was about to bring this up. The Nationals' projected regular lineup for this coming regular season, it was rough these last few years. How little production the Nats got at, say, the number 4 spot. And we would see Keibert Ruiz and Joey Meneses and, going back further like Nelson Cruz in the 4 spot, and just the Nats were getting nothing out of it. We know that C.J. Abrams is set to be the regular number 1 batter. Do you have a sense of what the regular, say, 1 through 4, 1 through 5 might look like?
I think we're about to start getting a little better sense now that James Wood's ready to play the field in games, and he's debuting as we tape this on Wednesday. They're playing the game in a couple hours, and he's going to be in left field, but they don't have a lot of the other regulars out there because they played yesterday. Once we see all of them together, I think we're going to get a better sense. But I believe the way that Davey is envisioning this in a perfect world is Abrams 1, Cruz 2, Wood 3, and then you go Lowe and Bell 4 and 5. Now, we've seen Nathaniel Lowe bat third so far this spring, and I think that's a product of James Wood being out and not able to play yet. But I would be interested to see if he would do that and move Wood down to 4 or 5 just as a little take some pressure off to start the year. Yeah, you're the big guy, and eventually you're going to move up to that spot, but let's go with the veteran for now. I don't know. I want to see once they have everybody all together how that looks. But I think their perfect scenario, if everybody's healthy and everybody's performing the way they want them to, that it's Abrams 1, Cruz 2, Wood 3. And boy, does that sound nice, given what we've been waiting to see for quite a while. If that comes to fruition and they do live up to what they're supposed to be, that could be a lot of fun to watch.
You're going to have to surgically remove the smile on my face off what you just said. Abrams, Cruz, Wood. That would be golden if we had that as the regular 1 through 3 for the Nationals. Now, you did not mention Luis Garcia Jr. Off his offensive production last season, I certainly could make the case he's worthy of being in the top 5 ahead of maybe a Josh Bell. What do you think Davey Martinez is thinking with Garcia?
He could be up in that range as well. And I think a lot's going to depend on matchups. It may be the kind of thing day-to-day changes a little bit. But I think sort of like Keibert Ruiz, and not as big a deal because Garcia is coming off a big breakthrough season. What is he ultimately? Probably not that 3, 4, even 5 hitter. He might be more of a 6 or 7 hitter on a good team. And I think they're perfectly comfortable with that idea. If he hits 6th behind those veterans and guys like Lowe and Bell who do draw walks, they're not just about slug. They do show patience at the plate and get on base. Garcia could come up as a number 6 hitter with a whole lot of RBI opportunities, and I think they like that possibility for him. The other thing, it's very left-handed heavy. They have some switch hitters that help, but it's a very lefty-heavy lineup, and we haven't also mentioned Paul DeYoung, who, while not part of the long-term plan, is going to be part of the short-term plan at third base, and is a rare right-handed hitter that they have and a guy who hits for power. So especially against lefties, well, I know he's had reverse splits, but you could see him move up a little bit there. Maybe we even see him bat 5th or 6th ahead of somebody else. So he's in that mix. But I think Lowe and Bell are kind of a notch above Garcia and DeYoung at the moment, all things being equal and depending what the matchups are. And the other thing, and I know this drove people crazy last year, but I do think it's going to be a thing again. When they face a lefty, I think Ahmed Rosario is going to be at second base with Luis Garcia on the bench. Maybe sometimes it's the right matchup, but Rosario has really good numbers against lefties over his career. We know Garcia has made progress there, but not always great. And while people might get frustrated by that and say, wait, he's the second baseman of the future, why not throw him out there? I think there's an understanding that he may not be the complete hitter at this point who deserves to play every single day, no matter the opponent. And they went out and got a utility infielder who can play second base pretty well and hits lefties very well. And so I do expect early on to see Ahmed Rosario starting over Luis Garcia against lefties.
Hey Nats fans, you know me as Tim Newmark, the guy who wrote the Nats Chat theme song. You may not know that 2025 is the 10th anniversary of the release of my personal favorite album, Galaxy. Check it out on your favorite streaming platforms today.
You just realized that you needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs help you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people that you want faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Plus, with Indeed sponsored jobs, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. How fast is Indeed? Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/BWN. Just go to Indeed.com/BWN right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/BWN. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine. And maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them. From disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Here's the set of the pitch. Swing and a long drive to left by Garrett. Way back. Going. Gone. Goodbye. Over the bullpen in left field. What a moment. Bang. Zoom goes Stone Garrett in a pretty fast home run jog around the bases. A 2-run shot with 2 out here in the bottom of the first inning on his second swing back in the major leagues. And it's the Nationals 3 and the Phillies nothing. He gets to wear the Uncle Slam hat. What a moment for Stone Garrett.
One more item. Stone Garrett. The Nationals on Tuesday afternoon announced that outfielder Stone Garrett had cleared outright waivers and been assigned to AAA Rochester. The Nats last Thursday afternoon, in officially announcing that they had agreed with reliever Kyle Finnegan on a 1-year contract, also announced having designated Garrett for assignment in what I think a lot of people would say was a surprising move, especially considering that in order to make room for Finnegan on the 40-man roster, the Nats could have done something like transferred Cade Cavalli to the 60-day injured list and didn't do that. Instead, DFA'd Stone Garrett. Now, the Nats president of baseball operations and general manager Mike Rizzo knows what he's doing. Garrett cleared outright waiver, still is with the organization. But what do you think the thinking was here in DFAing Stone Garrett?
I think it was a realization that his path to being on the big league roster, the opening day roster, was pretty slim. We talked about the 3 young starting outfielders who are not going to take a lot of days off. Alex Call has kind of shown that he can be a viable 4th outfielder right now who can play all 3 positions, work a good at bat, run the bases well, and that gave him the leg up over everyone else. And while Stone has made tremendous strides physically over the last year, and to me, to my eye, looked like a normal baseball player again, who can chase down balls in the outfield, who can run the bases and not really show any signs of the gruesome injury that he had suffered. It's still been a long time since he's played with any regularity at the big league level, and you just don't know what you can count on from him. And so I think under the circumstances, the feeling was, where is the path for him? There's not going to be DH at bats with Josh Bell as the primary guy. Let's make that move now. Give him the opportunity to catch on with another team if somebody does claim him, which they would have been okay with, happy for him. But also understanding if he does clear it, as he did, you still have him in the organization. Go let him play all the time, every day at Rochester. If he can recapture the form that he had a couple years ago, pre-injury, he'll be knocking on the door and they'll find a way to get him back up here in some capacity. But I don't think they were ready to just put him on the big league roster, hoping that he would be that guy again. And so because of that, maybe you can say, well, why did you make that move now? There were other moves they could have made, not just Cavalli. There were other guys who could have come off the 40-man roster. But if you were going to make that move anyways at the end of camp, why not make it now? Hope that he slides through and you still have him. And I think that's what the rationale was.
Well, we again are offering the opportunity for you to solicit shout-outs on the Nats Chat podcast this year. If you want to say a hello, a congratulations, a happy birthday, whatever, to someone who listens to the podcast, email Tim Shovers, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. We have this shout-out from Sam Cowan, a loyal listener. He has been a Nats Chat podcast listener since day one. We appreciate that very much, Sam. And Sam also is known in some circles as Coach Sam. And Coach Sam would like to congratulate the S'mores on their fairy tale 3rd/4th grade girls rec league hoop season, reminiscent of the 2019 Washington Nationals. The S'mores started the season 1-4, never gave up though, never stopped having fun and cheering each other on. And like the 2019 Nats, the S'mores ended the season on an improbable run, finishing 4-4 in the regular season, a 3-game winning streak. Now, the S'mores season did end with a heartbreaking first-round playoff exit. Not a championship parade, but the S'mores were the champs in the book of Coach Sam. And congratulations to Marley, Blakely, Rory, Lorelei, Scarlett, Nora, Lily, Olivia, Liv, Dale, Harper, and Coach Pete. Go S'mores! And of course, go Nats! We salute the S'mores mark on a job well done.
First of all, I love the team name. I mean, what a great team name, the S'mores. I love that. I'd love to see what that mascot would look like, although it might be a little tempting to eat him. Kind of like the Pop-Tarts mascot at the bowl game, the edible mascot, maybe edible S'mores. I like that. Great message from Coach Sam, who I've been in touch with before. He's a big fan of the team and has followed me for a long time. I love the enthusiasm there of not giving up despite a bad start to the season. We know these things can turn around. You just try to go 1-0 every day. And congrats to the S'mores for doing that and going on their run and finishing the season on a high note.
Well, I have a 7-year-old son who just finished his basketball season, and he plays soccer as well. And as you know, with a son, one of the things that they all look forward to are the post-game snacks. When you have a team called the S'mores, can you have anything other than S'mores as your post-game snack?
No, but then does that mean you need a campfire right there with you? Portable campfire at the field with you? I don't know. You're right. You have to, at least once during the season, you have to offer S'mores post-game, right?
You would think. Can get a little messy, but S'mores are good. And if you're called the S'mores, you got to live up to that billing, no doubt. You tell us what you think. Hit us up on X at @Nats_chat. You can find us on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. You can email the show, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. We have a website too. We'd love for you to check that out, natschatpodcast.com, in which you can purchase a Nats Chat podcast t-shirt. All Nationals radio highlights on Nats Chat are courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat Podcast.
Now the pitch. Swing and a long drive to left field. This is deep. Carroll going back, way back at the warning track at the wall, and it is gone! Goodbye! A grand slam for Stone Garrett! Bang! Zoom goes Stone Garrett! A grand slam home run! And the Nationals take the lead 4-1.